happy to introduce Eduardo Viola, who is Professor of International Relations Emeritus in the University of Sao Paulo and a permanent fellow of the Institute of Advanced Studies in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Throughout all of his career, Professor Viola was doing politics and sociology of climate change, climate crisis, climate action. And there are several books that he has published on the issue, including a major study called Brazil and Climate Change Beyond the Amazon, and a really big number of articles. That's right, that you, Eduardo, is one of the most oft-cited Latin American scholars in social sciences. It's very impressive. So Eduardo is visiting us on the way from Geneva, and we're counting on the ongoing collaboration. I'm very much looking forward to your talk.
Okay, thank you very much, Alex, for the presentation. Okay, so let's start. So the title is Climate Policy and Politics in the Democratic South with focusing on Brazil. I am not used to this, but anyway, okay, very nice. Okay, I will start with something that is not common, that is trying to convey a more sophisticated classification of countries. The prevailing today is global north and global south, okay? But this says about the per capita income of the countries, even that global south, the differentiation is significantly today, even, I mean, it's much better to use the World Bank, high middle income, low middle income, and low income countries. But anyway, and I think political science and internationalism is very important to consider the political regime. So we have combining the per capita income with the political regime classification, just the more simple one, democratic and autocracy. Autocratic, I mean, we can use more complex, that is liberal democracy, electoral democracy, electoral autocracy, closed autocracy, that is BDM. But anyway, according to this, we have 4 categories of countries: the democratic north, autocratic north, democratic south, autocratic south. Okay, so no, what happened here? So I am not used to this, but anyway, okay. No. Quick.
More into
Maybe the
the
keyboard.
More into the edge, or you can use the keyboard.
You can use the keyboard. Keyboard is there.
Yeah, keyboard.
You can use the flash, the arrows.
Okay. So the democratic north, United States, for how long we don't know, the Canada, European Union, United Kingdom, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Australia, New Zealand, and Chile more recently, because Chile is now has been upgraded to high income country. I mean, not anymore high middle income country, but high income country. So autocratic north among Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, Emirates, Qatar, Kuwait. All them are high income countries according to the World Bank. China is in the border, in the transition between high middle income and high income, but of course it's a superpower. So I mean, it pretends to be a developing country. Scandalous. Democratic South. Most South American countries Mexico, South Africa, India, Philippines, Indonesia, those are the more important. There is some question about India being moving from electoral democracy to electoral autocracy. This is debatable. Autocratic South, Venezuela, Cuba, Nigeria, Egypt, Ethiopia, Democratic Republic of Congo, Pakistan, Vietnam.
The other direction.
Uh-huh. Okay. So this is another thing that is relevant in my approach. Affinity between democracy and climate policy. So there is a correlation, but with important exceptions. Okay. So, for example, environmental policies were born in the democratic North in the 1970s. Okay. And climate policies born in the democratic North in 1990s. What were key for the emergence of climate policies and environmental policy? The existence of independent social movements and independent scientific community. These were key characteristics that were present in the democratic North. So the Rio Convention on Climate Change and the Kyoto Protocol were led by countries of the democratic North, more European and with differentiation than American. They assumed a commitment to reduce emissions. The US withdrew in March 2001 because Bush considered that it would be not just for the American people to allow that India and Brazil and China don't have any obligation. Okay. The rest of countries didn't accept committed, but based on a radical interpretation of the principle of common but differentiated responsibility. This is something very interesting about why the difficulties of the Kyoto Protocol on the climate regime, generally speaking, that there was in Rio and in Kyoto, there was a kind of difficult negotiation, and as many negotiations in the United Nations system, there was no agreement to specify what was common and what was differentiated. Okay, and so generally, you would say developing countries would like to say that 95% were differentiated, 5% were common, and vice versa. So this was very ambiguous, and this was always a major problem. Okay, and even one thing that this ambiguity became more a serious problem because of the increasing differentiation in countries, developing countries. Okay. Okay. Brazil was the second country in the democratic South after Costa Rica to have a climate policy. So this is relevant. Costa Rica was the first one, but it's a very small country. Okay, Costa Rica was amazing during a decade in the 80s. They moved from high rates of deforestation, 3% a year of deforestation, to practical stopping deforestation. And this was because international dynamics was key, because European countries offer, let's say, help for controlling deforestation. At the same time, they created the image of the country environmental champion, biodiversity, and there was also a lot of migration of people, retired American going to Costa Rica with environmental awareness, and so. But Brazil became the second country with a climate policy. Okay, of course there was first a generally an environmental policy. Okay, this is just looking at Latin American countries, but Costa Rica is not here. The carbon tracker classification of policies in South American countries last year. Okay, this is the most credible, or one of the most credible institutions assessing policies, climate policies in the world. So they classified extremely insufficient, critically insufficient, very highly insufficient, a lot of, extreme, highly critical, highly and insufficient, almost sufficient, and sufficient, but this is just Costa Rica seems a little bit, no more. So Brazil is classified as insufficient. That is not a terrible classification considering all categories. Argentina is critically insufficient. It's worse than Brazil. Mexico is highly insufficient, is better than Argentina. Chile is almost sufficient, is the best classification after Costa Rica, I would say. Peru almost sufficient, but considering what is included in the classification, a fair share, okay? And Colombia insufficient, igual at the same than Brazil. Maybe this. Okay. So this is a trajectory of Brazilian emissions. Okay, you see that this is land use change, land use change, and this is key for understanding the position of Brazil in the global carbon cycle. Okay, so you see that until 2004, it was very high. This is the amount of emissions coming from deforestation, but basically in the Amazon, but also in the Cerrado Savannah. And we were in the 2000s, since middle 2000, there was a dramatic decline because we were the first consistent climate policy in Brazilian history. There were previous laws and so on, but not implemented, not enforced. And here we have this dramatic decline. This is the most dramatic decline in carbon emissions in a country that was not suffering an economic catastrophe like Russia in the 90s or a war, let's say. So there was a dramatic decline. The prestige of Brazil in the climate regime increased dramatically in this period. But after there was some stagnation and growing again, particularly peaking during the Bolsonaro administration recently. And all the others are, so this is key for understanding the dynamic of Brazil. Here we have agricultural emissions, okay, that are growing because Brazil became an agricultural power, okay? Energy growing, I mean, also growing the GDP, and residuals growing also, and industrial process always very low, very different from other countries, okay? Okay. And here you can see 1990, 2000, 2010, 2019, the evolution of emissions the proportion. Look, 1990, 64% land use change, mostly deforestation. Okay, was a real. In 2000, some reduction, but still very high deforestation. In 2010, a major change. Deforestation reduced to a half, and growing proportionally and absolute also agriculture and energy. And 2019, a reversion. Again, the growing proportion of, but not like in 1990. This is the Bolsonaro administration, okay, of deforestation. Okay, so let's go through the different administrations. What happened? This is those are years of the Lula president, 2 terms. Each term is 4 years in Brazil. Okay, was an alternative from center right to center left, from 8 years of Cardoso administration to 8 years of Lula administration. The environmental movement was part of the victorious coalition, Lula coalition, not Workers' Party and other parties, okay, and also part of the cabinet. Okay, there was a program for deforestation controlling the Amazon, combining actions of conservation, new national parks, new protected areas, monitoring, law enforcement, and financial resources implemented since 2004. This was event, so this is the key of the success. How Brazil was successful in this period, and a country that called the attention of the world in terms of being reducing emissions. Okay, there was also a program for supporting the wind, biomass, and solar power. Okay, so we will see that during the 2010s there will be a significant growing of wind and solar power, also biomass for electricity. But it was at the beginning was promotion and some subsidies from government, okay, and afterward became the market dynamic prices was enough for growing these new energies. So Brazil was a country extremely hydropower during until the 90s. Why hydropower? Because historically didn't have coal or oil. So for that reason electricity was built up hydro. This is a very peculiar country from this point of view. Here we're in a country also where hydro is very, very, very okay. In 2009, we have a first climate change systemic law in a country that is not a developed country. And even not all developed countries have a systemic climate change law. This was approved in 2009. And in 2009, there was a Brazilian commitment for COP15 in Copenhagen that was very interesting. Brazil was the only developing country besides always Costa Rica that has a commitment to reduce emission, but not absolute reduction. The commitment was to going away from business as usual. So the idea was, okay, we will grow emissions, but lower than it would be if we were business as usual. This was the committee. So period 2011-2018. The 2 presidents, Rousseff and Temer. Temer was the vice president. There was impeachment in some moment. Okay. President Rousseff, 2011-16, same party, same coalition, more or less, less committed than Lula. So here we have something very interesting, that the personality of the president, the mindset of the president is important in the dynamic of climate policy in Brazil. This is something that is, there are other countries in which this happened, because here is the personality of the president, not the party. There was not a change in the party or the coalition, not relevant in the coalition. But Dilma Rousseff mindset was different than Lula's. Actually was more doctrinary. Dilma Rousseff was a person related to energy, okay? And so she thought, at that time, she thought that wind, solar, and were energies that were alternative, very, in some moments she spoke about energy for hippies, okay? But this was really weird. So the president has actually a very important capacity of implementing the laws, okay, or even some executive regulation. Another thing that happened was the rural caucuses in parliament became strongest, and the environmental representatives were weakened at this point. What happened? During the Lula administration, forces in favor of deforestation were surprised by how incisive, strong was the offensive of the government in order to control, repress deforestation. So they were not organized, but they, in the next electoral cycle, they organize it, and they have a significant power. Okay. However, even because with a president that was less progressive, less climate friendly, like Rousseff compared with Lula, Brazil position in Paris negotiation of the Paris Agreement was also very progressive. So the national determined contribution that Brazil presented was to reduce emission in absolute terms. There was not other developing country presenting this. Okay. So at the same time, we were already in a severe economic crisis. 2015-16, 7% contraction of GDP. This produced the kind of declining of climate awareness and in the population. So climate became very marginal. Okay, and so this is something very interesting. That in order to have a climate policy, you need to have some economic situation that is good, let's say. It's very difficult to have climate policy in a situation where you have a reduction of per capita income, for example. Okay. Because of this, also there was the impeachment of Rousseff, not because of climate, it was because of economic crisis. Okay, Amazonian deforestation grew again, 70% between 2015 and 2017. So the lowest year was 2012. It grew a little 2013, 14, and grew significantly in 2015, 2017. Here we have the period 2019-22 is Bolsonaro president, that is well known in the world. I mean, erosion of democracy by the president, okay? Ostensive anti-environment and anti-climate policy. This is a major rupture with the past. And of course, was a lot encouraged by the dynamic of America, the victory of Trump in the election of 2016. So there was this, there was, let's say, we consider today that there was a kind of far right that was not outspoken during many years in Brazil, but after the victory of Trump, it became outspoken and was represented by Bolsonaro. Bolsonaro has been previously military, an officer from the military that, but he has been retired because was trying to unionize the military. Okay, so this is okay. There was so a partial deconstruction of climate institutions. Of course, partial because the process of deconstruction was not easy, and you have the institutions that were created by law. You have the civil service that has stability, okay, in the jobs, all these kind of things, okay. So, but what happened? Yes, is a strong increase in Amazonian deforestation, adding to the previous increase, okay, promoted by government. Not before. Now it's promoted directly by the discourse of Bolsonaro is go to the forest. We need development. The international criticism, I don't care. If they care, they should pay us for not deforestation. Okay, was a major reversion of previous process. It was like a mentality of the 80s, let's say, okay, and the military regime at that time. So the European Union strongly criticized it, and particularly Germany, France, and the UK. What did the European Union was to freeze the approval of the free trade agreement European Mercosur. This was a treaty that was negotiated during many years, started in 1999 and was completed in the end of 2018 and signed with some pending issues in the beginning of 2019. So the beginning of the Bolsonaro administration. So what the European Union, I mean, when at the end of 2019, the first year of the Bolsonaro administration, when it was clear that Bolsonaro was really promoting deforestation, so the European Union froze the signature of the agreement. And so another thing that is very important is that Trump was very supportive of Bolsonaro. Okay, so the Bolsonaro promoted the foreign policy of automatic alignment with the United States. Okay, generally speaking, Brazil has a kind of history of independent foreign policy, non-alignment. This was the prevailing, with oscillation, but this was historically the prevailing foreign policy of Brazil since the 60s. Okay, even the military, except one period, were more oriented to non-alignment, despite being a strong anti-communist. Okay. Well, this is something very interesting what happened. Bolsonaro attempted a nationalist mobilization against the European Union, okay? And it failed. Okay, so there was not, Bolsonaro has a constituency that supported him, but not enough to mobilize against the foreigners. Like it was, so this was a failure. That was important because in some moment this could be successful, let's say, but here it was a failure. And in 2021, of course, Bolsonaro supported publicly the re-election of Trump. And even on the Minister of Foreign Affairs said that January 6 people were patriots. Okay, this was Bolsonaro. But finally, Biden started the president, and Bolsonaro started a policy of accommodation with the Biden administration. And so it changed the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Minister of the Environment. Okay, was much more in discourse than in practice, but was a need of accommodation. We arrived to the president, the Lula the third Lula president. Okay, Lula, center left, won the election in the second round by only 1.6% of the vote, similar to Trump in the popular vote last year, 1.5 something. Okay, but Congress, you have the election of the Congress and the first round of the presidential election same day. Second round is just president or governors that didn't have absolute majority. Okay, and so but the Congress was elected in the first round and with center-right majority. Okay, that is created afterwards some problems for advancing climate policy by the Lula administration. Bolsonaro didn't recognize the defeat, but here, well, during 2002 to 2022, the Biden administration sent 3 envoys, special envoys, to Brazil in order to convey the message: don't try a coup to the military, basically. Okay, don't try a coup because we will sanction dramatically, like Russia. This was the threat, and was effective. Okay, the threat was effective, though. I mean, for example, in the high command of the army, the commander of the navy was in favor of the coup. The commander of the air force was against, and but the most important for a coup is the army. And there was a vote in the high command of the army. 16 four-star generals. 11 vote against the coup and 5 for the coup. Okay, and the commander was more neutral. The general that was the commander of the high command. Okay, so I mean, was generally speaking, would say 99% of the military voted Bolsonaro. Okay, in the election. This is there were not people. So the question, but one thing is to vote, another thing is do a coup, and particularly with having United States against and threats of sanction. So this was very important. Biden administration recognizing the victory 10 minutes after announced for electoral justice. Okay, so clear message, and very different. If Trump would have been president, the coup would have materialized. Of course, afterward to govern after a coup, a complex society like Brazil would have been very difficult. Okay, but anyway, the attempt would have existed, and this has been dramatically damaging the society. There is one thing here that is very interesting. Lula talked with the Biden administration several times through messengers that he won the support. of Biden in case of Bolsonaro don't recognize in his veto. So there was an agreement between Lula and Biden in order to support each other. This created an illusion in the Biden administration that Lula would have a pro-Western foreign policy, okay? But what prevailed was not the conjuncture, the importance of the European and American for avoiding the coup, but the traditional mindset of Lula and the most of PT, okay? So generally anti-American and anti-liberalism. And sympathetic to China particularly, but okay. Finally, there was the equivalent to January 6, 21 in United States, that the January 8, 23, there was an mass, not very big, but mass insurrection basically in Brasilia. During 2 months, more than 2 months, Bolsonaro supported civilians and some retired military were in the barracks all over the country, asking for military intervention. Okay, so a kind of pressure, significant pressure. Okay, so Lula's take power on January 1st. Okay. So at that moment, there was a significant immediate support by the Biden administration. Generally, the high command, already 2 members of the high command that had voted for the coup were retired. And generally, I would say the decision by the high command has been taken before. So, but this was a more extreme wing of the military that, let's say, when finally it was something that they destroyed a lot of material goods. I mean, the House, the Congress, the presidential palace, the just Supreme Court, but no more than this. Okay. We can say that at that time and today, around 20% of the electorate were far right. The other were right, strongly anti-Workers' Party. Okay, they voted against the Workers' Party. Okay, not for the far right. I mean, 30% of the vote for Bolsonaro. I mean, 60% of the vote for Bolsonaro was not for a far right program. Was against the Workers' Party, against the left. Okay, and far right, the characteristic is a strong climate negationist. Okay, so Brazil in the global political economy. So generally, what is today? It's an agricultural power, major exporter of agro-industry like soybean, corn, cotton, beef, and poultry. This is agro-industry. It's not traditional agriculture, okay? It's industrial agriculture. This is very important to consider. There is also traditional agriculture, but this doesn't export, and it's a minor part of GDP. Energy is an energy and mineral power. Iron ore, oil, steel, aluminium, and potentially lithium, niobium, rare earths. Brazil has a lot of all this. It's a very huge territory. Okay. So another thing or characteristic of Brazil: high proportion of fixed capital in foreign hands, 17%. This is not common in a large country like Brazil. It's more common in small countries. And This is American, Canadian, European, Japanese, Korean, Australian, and more recently Chinese. The more recently meaning in the 21st century. A lot of this capital is from the beginning of the 20th century and middle 20th century, but growing very fast. The Chinese investment growing much faster than all the others, but still is compared with American, European, or Japanese or Korean is smaller, but growing. Okay? Industry, the manufacture is protected, and proportion of GDP fall from 23% in 2010 to 9%. So there was a very early deindustrialization. Okay, this is characteristic of Brazilian society. But at the same time, the PT was the country of the industry, the workers, the working class, manufacturer. So the idea of still rebuilding industry is very strong in Brazil, in a sector of society. Okay, most industry is protected, not internationally competitive. Okay, some is internationally competitive. For example, aircraft, Embraer is one. A lot used for domestic within transportation within Europe. You fly a lot in Embraer. It's bigger than the Canadian one today. And also equipment for oil production in deep waters. Has a very also scientific technology complex for oil exploration and production in deep waters. Okay? So the defense budget, just 1.4% is among the low, compared with the lowest European, meaning Portugal, something like this. And most is in personnel. Okay? Almost all weapon systems coming from NATO countries. There was an attempt of an independent air force, so they decided to fight the fighters from Sweden, but Sweden now is in NATO, so was not anymore. So the weapons is, of course, China has tried and Russia has tried to sell equipment, but so far they has not been successful. Okay, though more recently the commander of the army had said that we need to diversify because of Trump and all these kind of things. So probably new weapons, but there is no money for, no budget for new weapons in Brazil. Okay. Okay. And so this is the, we start with the part of deforestation, just to take an idea. The green is all pristine forest, completely pristine forest. Huh? The yellow is partially deforested, and the red is completely deforested. Here, the eastern Amazon, and this is the gray is more transitional forest. It's a transition between the forest and the savanna, the cerrado savanna. Lula deforestation, control of deforestation. South American Amazon is a carbon sink equivalent to around 12 years of global carbon emission. So Brazil, the place of Brazil in the world in terms of the carbon cycle is much more connected with land use change, with deforestation than with energy. Okay, this is very important. Brazil has 62% of sovereignty over the forest. So, for example, this is clear why Europeans are very interested in protecting, supporting the protection of the forest by Brazil, because there is in the European policy there is a kind of trade-off between they, according to the principle of climate justice, Europe should not support control of deforestation in Brazil, in poor, in low income or low middle income, not in high middle income country. But because of this is a major carbon sink, and Brazil is the key country, so it's much more worthily, effective and efficient to protect the forest in Brazil than in other parts of the world where state has much less state capacity. Okay? So a strong reduction of deforestation in the Amazon in 23 to 24, around 35%. This is very important. So again, Brazil retake what happened in the middle 2000s, with an administration that has, though the forces with with in favor of deforestation are very powerful, because in the 2000 deforestation was an illicit, but done in a more small scale, and now is a lot connected with organized crime and even narco traffic. Okay, so it's a major difference today. Okay, but Marina Silva again is the leader of all this controlling of the world, like it was in the 2000s. So, and the Cerrado Savannah, and this is new, there was first year increase of deforestation, but in the second year also a reduction of deforestation. We have here the agribusiness. This is very interesting because it's not well known outside Brazil. We have three major sectors of agribusiness. One sector is advanced technologically and in favor of decarbonization. Second sector is advanced technologically but reluctant to decarbonization. And the third one is tradition. Okay, so, and what happened? This sector is growing, and people, a lot of owners of rural entrepreneurs or corporation even, are moving from the second one to the first one. Okay, the first one, the Europe, people who export to Europe are all in the first sector. Okay, resistance to deforestation control in the others in Congress by rural caucus, sector 2 and 3. There is a plan for low carbon agriculture. 10% of credit is for low carbon agriculture. 90% is conventional credit. And this is a major battle inside the cabinet between the Minister of Agriculture and the Minister of the Environment. The Minister of Environment wants to grow significantly the amount of credit that goes to low carbon agriculture. Energy policy. Electricity, more than 90% low carbon. Okay, is hydro. This is 2023, more or less. Hydro 60%, solar 14% has grown dramatically in the last 6 years. Okay, so wind is growing slowly since 2010, 2009, and biomass, modern biomass, 6% for electricity. Oil, Brazil produced today, last year, 4.3 million barrels of oil. Okay, is the 7th world oil producer and the 10th exporter. 44% of exportation go to China. Estimations are that it will become the 5th oil producer by 2030. Brazil imports this export crude, but imports diesel and gasoline. Okay, one place where increased dramatically the importation of diesel was from Russia in the last 3 years, and the lower price than the market. Okay. a strong support in society and government for increasing oil production and exportation. So here, the forces, carbon-intensive forces, are much more stronger, social, political, economically than decarbonization. This is very clear. Huh? And Brazil became member of OPEC Plus to 2024. Petrobras, the discourse of Petrobras today is that it will use revenue from oil on energy transition. Petrobras now is fighting for exploring and exploitation of oil in the equatorial margin. It's a large, let's say, part of the coast that is similar geological to Guyana. That is the possibility of exporting there, and there is some debate, but anyway, it's growing this. Green industrialization and carbon market. There is a plan for green reindustrialization, okay? But difficult because fiscal deficit don't allow for subsidies. So there is always debate about this because the Brazilian public debt is growing during the Lula administration. It's already 80% of GDP. That is a lot for the middle income country. There is now a national law of regulated carbon market passed in 23 in Congress, but exclude agriculture. So the agribusiness sector, because a lot of agriculture is very important in emissions, was successful in saying no, agriculture. There is no country in the world except New Zealand that the agriculture is in the regulated carbon market, so we will not be a specific. There is a lot of time until specific regulations so to this market. But here there is something important, that an unrealistic expectation of selling carbon credits in the regulated international market. Okay? The problem is that the European Union doesn't allow to buy. The European Union is a closed market so far. Okay, so the only countries that are potential candidates to buy are Switzerland and South Korea. Okay, and at the same time, the Lula administration and most entrepreneurs consider protection and the EU reduction, deforestation reduction law. No? Adaptation to climate change. Brazil have a national policy for adaptation to climate change since 2016, but implementation has been very poor. In 24, Brazil had 80 million people, 38% of the population, vulnerable to climate extremes, drought, heat, and flood. So a lot, okay? And that is generally correlated with low-income people, okay? The Brazil is a very unequal country, very high Gini index, okay? One of the highest in the world. And drugs also threaten agricultural production because agriculture, there is agricultural production, there is now is growing irrigation, but it's much more based in nature. Yeah? Adaptation is mission of states and municipalities, but there is lack of federal coordination. And this is something that the Lula administration is having problem because of the extreme climate event. Foreign policy. Lula administration present itself as non-aligned by participating in BRICS Plus, led by China. BRICS Plus countries, except in Brazil, have carbon-intensive energy metrics. So Brazil is very different from the rest of the BRICS. Today, BRICS Plus are 11 countries, okay? Lula have had, in some moments, anti-Western rhetoric, even during the Biden administration. This has increased now. The first month, Lula administration was afraid of Trump, I mean, to be out of the Trump radar. but now he's speaking anti-Western. I mean, he was in Beijing recently with anti-Western rhetoric. And this is something very unpopular in Brazil, okay, in the media and so on. Lula participated in the celebration of victory in Moscow, May 9th. The only leader of a democracy participated. Immediately after, flew to Beijing and signed many economic agreements with Xi. A lot, like 50. I mean, we don't know the pace of implementation. All this, of course, is uncertain. But it's very interesting. Polls show that Lula foreign policy, that more pro-China, doesn't have majority support in Brazil. This is something about the future. Now Brazil is president of BRICS for the first time. The meeting will be in July. The government is afraid because there was a lot of visibility in the meeting that Trump could consider an enemy meeting. Okay, but Brazil will try to. Is already trying to shape the agenda, because the president of the BRICS each year has agenda setting capacity in order to the idea of greening the BRICS Plus. So this is almost an impossible task, because BRICS Plus extremely carbon intensive economy, except in Brazil and Ethiopia. Okay, some big plus countries, big exporters of fossil fuels, mean oil, coal, or gas. So Russia, South Africa, Brazil, Iran, Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, Emirates, Egypt. Okay? BRICS Plus associates also exporters of fossil fuel. Kazakhstan, these are not plain members. Kazakhstan, Nigeria, Uzbekistan, Malaysia, Bolivia. Bolivia is natural gas. Brazil will try to approve resolutions in favor of a reduction of emissions and energy transition. It may but we have almost null probability of implementation by members. But the main agenda will be increasing trade among members using yuan. Okay, this will be sure. Brazil is afraid of American retaliation because he's the president of the conference. So this is something complex in Brazilian foreign policy. A minute. COP30 perspective. Last COP with some significant advance was COP26 in Glasgow, 2021. Radical change of the environment of COPs after Russia full invasion of Ukraine, 2022. 3 last COPs in autocracies and 4 fossil exporters, Egypt, Dubai, and Azerbaijan. This was not the traditional COP because of this correlation with democracy. The first COP that was in an autocracy was in Qatar in 2012. Okay, so until 2012, all in democracy, and most continues being in democracy. Now there were 3 continuous in autocracy. Okay, huge logistic problems in Belém. Lula decided to do in the Amazon with debate because there are a lot of logistic problems. So the attraction was to do in the Amazon, in the middle of the Amazon, that is Belém. But at the same time, from the point of view of the Lula administration, this was something risky because this was decided in 2020, beginning of 23. And what happened if Lula doesn't have strong success in controlling deforestation? So they will put all the focus there. So, but from this point of view, it's going okay. Another thing that is very important is Brazil's government is promoting intensive participation of civil society and corporations. This is probably the COP in which the president, the government has promoted much more than any other the participation of civil. This is a tradition of Brazil since the Rio conference in 20. That was the first global conference at the end of the Cold War with a strong participation of civil society. Okay, so finance negotiation extremely difficult. Giant gap between offer, gradual growing from 100 billion to 300 billion from developed countries, let's see, until 2025. But in the present dynamic, this is even utopian. And demand $1.3 trillion since 2026. So it's opposite words. Okay. So we have the absence of the US. Okay. Even US is interested to go. Brazilian government is expect the US doesn't participate in Belém, because if it participate, it will participate for undermine the conference. And so, because this something like this happened in Madrid in 2019 in the first Trump administration, but this is unknown yet, because United States has the right for 1 year since the withdrawal until January 26th of belonging to the Paris Agreement. Uncertainty about China, what will China do? Resentment of low-income countries and low middle-income countries will be very high again, like it was in previous conference. Brazilian government is making a maximum effort to get more contribution from developed countries and from high-income countries recently, China and the Persian Gulf countries, but respecting its status as development country. So he said, you can contribute, but this doesn't mean that you are now upgraded to a developed country. Okay, but China will not be persuaded by this. Probably, but China will contribute for sure. It's already contributing. Okay, but always not as obligation. We are not obliged because we are in the developing country. Okay. China position in the global carbon cycle has changed in the last years from a climate predator country to an ambivalent country that continues building coal-fired thermal power plants, but has become a major producer and exporter of wind, solar energy equipment, electric vehicles, and batteries. This is the new China, let's say, that is more. It's not a progressive. Many people say, China now is a very progressive place. It's not. It's ambivalent anyway. Okay. Probably last year there was a peaking of carbon emission by China, according to Carbon Brief. But this is we need 2 or 3 years. Conclusions. The 3 countries of Latin America, Chile, Uruguay, and Costa Rica, classified by BDEM as liberal democracies, has the better climate policy. After comes Brazil, classified as electoral democracy. Democracy promoted a gradual build-up of climate policy in Brazil, except during the Bolsonaro administration. That was a deviation, but coming back. Okay? Brazil was a pioneer among developing countries in having climate goals. In Copenhagen in 2009, away of business as usual, and in Paris 2015, absolute reduction of emissions. The only beyond Costa Rica and Morocco in the case of Paris Agreement. During the Lula administration, 2023-25, Brazil pretend to be climate leader of the world, but can't because the contradiction between the progression in reforestation control and the promotion of oil. I think this is the last one. Thank you very much for your attention, and I am ready for your questions.
Well, thank you so much. That's a fantastic story and very detailed and good. So please questions and comments and suggestions, please.
I have a question regarding, because I don't really know, how is Marina Silva seeing this this discrepancy and this dichotomy within Lula's positioning nowadays.
Okay, Marina Silva is against the increasing exploration of oil, particularly in the Amazon. Not in the Amazon. This equatorial margin is in the coast. Okay, but it's close to the mouth of the Amazonian River. But at the same time, Petrobras has another company that want to explore. Have a regional record of for accidents, oil accidents. Okay, so Marina has already been in the field. Okay? I mean, she recognized, and now the discourse 1.5 years ago, she was talking against this, saying that not in the Amazon, and also this will be an stranded asset. Okay, but now. Lula and the PT and the whole cabinet, except here, the Minister of the Treasury also are in favor. So now she say this is a question for the Minister of Mining and Energy, not from my minister. Okay, so she's not fighting anymore. Though there were some, let's say, some moment there was uncertain. Maybe Marina would resign, okay? But the problem is that she has a lot of pressure. Whole people that is working in the Ministry of the Environment that they will say, but if we go, it's worse. If you resign, it will be worse. And the battle for oil exploration, we lost, this will oil exploration. So now it's not going to sign. Okay? So it's more or less this is the situation.
Yeah, please. Tiff.
Thank you, Eduardo, for the whole picture on how the situation in the region is. Maybe it's more a comment on, I would like to hear more your opinion or how you see the situation now, particularly with this closeness relation or with China lately from the whole region, and particularly from Brazil. And of course, this is going to have huge impacts on the increasing independence and uses of natural resources for make stronger these economic relations, meaning impact in changes on land use of more, of course, oil and so on and so forth. But on the other hand, there's more and more space, and as you present a little bit, more eyes of the international community on the role or the key role that has Brazil, not only for the natural resources that contains and so on and so forth, but also for the key position that can play, plus this COP30 that we all know that is most propaganda than truly something.
Yeah.
But a little bit following the question of a colleague here in front, like there's preoccupation on how to play with that dichotomy. How you see now today in terms of the play of forces, also the role of Chile, also the role of Colombia, for example. No, the presidents that has very greenish discourses and very pro-advanced discourses, but on the other hand, they're promoting reprimarization, which is always our problem.
They're promoting what?
Reprimarization, no? Which is our problem, the region problem. So, yeah.
Well, you are. Where are you from?
Colombia.
Colombia. Okay. So, let's say the Chinese economic penetration in South America has been continuous during the 21st century. Different degrees. Okay, some countries more, than other less. For example, a country like Brazil has a strong trade dependence from China. 38% of Brazilian export last year went to China. 38. Okay, but for example, Brazil doesn't have financial dependence of China.
The
This
region
is,
has.
the finance is all Western. It's very different from Argentina. Argentina is less trade dependent of China, but very strong dependent from finance. And even when the Scott Bessent was in Brazil, was very supporting Milei, was saying, but we don't want anymore to be that you be dependent of financially from China. So I would say that the China investments in South America are generally positive. Okay, generally, okay. So it depends a lot on the legislation of the country. For example, what could be the environmental impact? Okay, in Brazil, the environmental impact of Chinese investment is they have to protect the environment as much as a Western corporation or a national corporation. Okay, there is no, and so there is significant regulation for protecting the environment. So the impact of Chinese investment in terms of environmental degradation is low. At the same time, in a country like Brazil, Brazil has a very low, let's say, very low national saving. I mean, it's a country with a scarcity of capital. So it's a country that, for its whole history, welcomed foreign capital. Okay? Different from other countries in Latin America that at some moments are being aggressively against foreign capital. So Brazil has it. So China investment from this point of view in the society doesn't make any difference, and in Chinese investments are welcome. But at the same time, the polls show that one thing is economic investment, other things is the policy of cultural and political penetration of China. For example, like the Confucius Institutes, there are a lot of Confucius Institutes in Brazil. There are programs for giving scholarships to the children of people who are in parliament, national parliaments, state parliaments, and municipal parliaments. So those are, if you are a son of a kind of representative, and you want a scholarship for going to China 1 year to visit or whatever, you get for sure. Okay, so there is a very active policy in this direction. Chinese corporations do lobby in national parliament, but like other countries also do lobbies in country. For example, in terms of electric cars, let's say Brazil has until the Brazilian tax for import cars is very high, 35%. Okay. During the Bolsonaro administration, that has a minister of the economy that was a modernizer, okay, there was the elimination of tax for electrical vehicles. At that time, coming from Europe or Tesla, let's say. But okay, when Lula administration started, there was a proposal from BYD, okay, the Chinese corporation, to buy an old plant abandoned by Ford in Bahia, in the state of Bahia, okay, and for producing hybrid and pure electrical vehicles, okay? But they asked for condition, it's a huge investment, that reinstate the tax on electric vehicles. So in this case, what the BYD was, okay, we will not import anymore, we will manufacture here. This is like the French policy in relation to car manufacturers. Attract, if you produce here, yes. If you import, no, okay? And so this was accepted. So now we're reinstated, not fully, just next year. And the production of BYD in Bahia started like in April, okay? So this is going to be a major production. But anyway, during the period in which there was not tax for the electrical vehicles, there was a huge importation of Chinese electrical vehicles in Brazil. The same happened with equipment for solar energy and wind power, okay? A lot imported from China. What is this is one of the dimensions. The other dimension is, well, very present today in the Brazilian society, is, well, now we will be flooded by Chinese cheap importations that will completely destroy our manufacturing capacity. Okay, so we will not, so we need to have a strategy. So the PT has sympathy for China, that want a lot of Chinese capital in Brazil. At the same time, it is afraid of a flooding of Chinese products deviated from exportation to the United States. So I think this kind of things is in other Latin American countries is different, because Brazil has still a significant in domestic industry. For example, if you have a car industry, you have this ambivalence, okay? If you don't have a car industry, like most of South American countries, it's okay to import, because you have very good, high quality electric vehicles, more cheaper. And so this is advancing, and there is no, from a point of view of economic logic, will advance. The only country right now, there are two countries that have governments that are against China, let's say. Argentina, clearly, and Ecuador, okay? So all the other countries are saying, okay, and even now with Trump particularly, okay, China is much more friendly, it's much more predictable country, okay? So this is an inflow, everything, okay? But I would say that there is a very favorable environment, right, cultural and political environment and economical, for increasing Chinese penetration in South America, except in Argentina. Argentina, no. Argentina is trying, but even from the Argentinian government, what the American government did, it supported Argentinian government for having new money from the IMF. Okay, this was important in order to finish the cambio control. Okay, so now Argentina became, it was extremely cheap 1 year and a half, and now is the more expensive country in South America. Today, Buenos Aires is second only to Montevideo in terms of cost of living. Okay? So it's the opposite. Argentina, 1.5 years ago, all Brazilians were going to Argentina. Now Argentinians are coming to Brazil. Okay, so what happened? Even the Milei policy, how long it could be pro-American with the Trump, that is, okay, so that is America first, America, okay, I think difficult. So it's a moment for really very, very favorable to China, with all the negative, because I would say economically positive, in my view, okay? But we need to see some specific case. But politically and cultural, negative, the Chinese penetration, because it's in order to align those countries with China and also promoting autocracy Chinese way. But on the other side, you have Trump now that is also promoting autocracy. So it's very, very difficult moment.
And Putin. More questions? I have a kind of, thanks. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you for your presentation. Nice one. Just a short question, and I think it's a general issue that I usually think about when we are talking about Global South.
What about what?
Global South.
Global South, yeah.
We tend to say that we have policy, for example, climate change policy. But the question which I want to put before you is, now we have so many policies you may mention in your presentation from Brazil, but the question of implementation, I don't know what you see into that. You have policy, but what about the implementation?
Okay.
Take for example, I know that all the global, almost, not all, don't let me say all, almost all countries you have in Global South usually have CDP, climate, CAD something, or this acronym, climate adaptation policy, for example, but you have it in paper. What of implementation?
Okay, I would say Brazil is one of the southern countries that has more implementation, but is short of what is the gap between the paper, the law, and the implementation is significant, generally speaking. If we look at the Lula policy in implementing deforestation control, is strong. This is a case that is strong. But you say, but Brazil is want to be the leader of the globe, of the world in climate policy, and it's not at all, because it's strongly promoting fossil fuel oil exploration, oil and now gas also, not coal, because Brazil doesn't have coal. So it is this. I mean, I would say most of Global South, there are poor law or even regulation and infra-legal policy that in favor of climate policy. But the very small that exist is generally not implemented. Okay? This is the reality in general. Okay, it's very difficult to implement climate policy if you are a low-income country or a low-middle-income country. But we live in an epoch in which to have a discourse in favor of decarbonization is correct, but actually it's real. I mean, for a population with a low per capita income, there is the urge, even they suffer much more than other countries' extreme climate events. But even that, investing in economic growth make more sense than investment in climate. So capacity of adaptation is very low generally.
about land use change
Mhm.
and emissions. So there are two sources of emissions in the world: burning fossil fuel, which makes 87% globally, and land use change, which makes 13% globally. The poorer is the country worldwide, the higher is the percent of emissions coming from land use change, and the lower is the percent of emissions coming from fossil fuel burning. So it's very much about global south, global north, because poor countries are in the global south, but it's probably more than that. Anyway, I think I read about all that some, probably many times, but I realized it when I was in Brazil. I realized that indeed oil and coal and all that are not the only sources of emissions. 1/7 of world emissions, 1/7 of climate change basically comes from entirely different source, which is this land use change. And it's just a different world, sociologically, whatever, meteorologically, in all possible ways, politically, all that we're talking about, like the petrostate, petroaggression. That's about oil curves, that's about fossil fuel. But land use change is just a different world, really. It's not just two hemispheres, it's just a different planet, really, in terms of just how it works. So we need to produce some kind of theory, whatever, that would compare and contrast and complement these two sources, because still 13% is still a lot. Still a lot. Like every unit counts, every percent counts, 13%. And we need to organize some kind of dialogue between those many of our colleagues who just think about fossil fuel emissions, zero. Period, nothing else. But in the south and in places like Brazil, people really, even though there is Petrobras, there is also fossil fuel, there are traffic jams, huge cities, São Paulo, etc. Air could be bad, but because as you said, 60% of emissions come from land use change, basically come from.
This was in 1990.
So, but it's still about 40%.
It was 40 in 2020 that it has grown. It was 40, 45, 44. But now it's diminished. But anyway, it's a lot.
Yeah, it's a
And
lot.
if you add agriculture, that is similar to land use change. So it's more.
And it's entirely different practical measures of implementation. Decarbonization is just a different thing. From this police control and planning and legal acts that limit or reverse deforestation. Just like reforestation, I decided to call it all reforestation. Decarbonization on the one hand, that's about 80%. What to do with that? That's decarbonization. What to do with the 13%? Let's call it reforestation. Just one word, reforestation. But it's just entirely different strategy.
Very
different paradigm.
Very different. It's interesting because Brazil is a country which has right now a significant oil industry. At the same time that it has a significant agriculture and deforestation. Okay, this is a very peculiar country from this point, because it's not a small country; it's a large country.
But the Brazilians talk mostly about the Amazon. They don't.
No, in Brazil,
they don't talk about Petrobras.
No,
they talk about
they
the
talk
Amazon.
about the Amazon no, for sure. Because emissions coming from oil exploration in Brazil is, let's say, energy and part of industry. okay? And between energy, not all energy is coming from fossil fuels, because there is a lot of electricity is not from fossil fuels, and there is the liquid fuel that Brazil has a significant mix with ethanol, biodiesel, and all this. So anyway, but Brazil, a major change in Brazil is that Brazil reduced deforestation to zero, let's say, and reforest. That was another. Brazil actually doesn't need any more deforestation because there are a lot of abandoned lands, okay? And there is a lot of cattle raising land that could be modernized. So Brazil economy could grow, agriculture could grow without new deforestation and with reforestation. Reforestation, there is a plan for reforestation and all this that is partially implemented. There is one thing that Brazil reforests a lot, that is for producing paper and cellulose. There has large modern corporations that are not just reforesting, they are afforesting places where there was not forest before, and now there are forests, okay? And they use for paper. And other parties planted forest for steel, for green steel. There is some in Brazil also, green steel. So, but anyway, what the change of Brazil in the world will be controlled deforestation. That is feasible, but there are resistance forces. And now the resistance forces are more complex because it's in a remote area in the Amazon, a lot interrelated with organized crime, big organized crime, and narco traffic. Okay, so for example, now you have areas in the Amazon where you have illegal gold mining, for example. Okay, those in rivers, there are big barks, big ships, big middle that are operating with people armed that they didn't exist before. So if you want to repression of this gold mining, not a very, very small scale gold mining, okay, but this in the rivers that is million scale, let's say, you need the army. Without the police is not capable of because they have a armed people protecting all these ships. This is a major problem.
Lula sent the armed forces recently, I think, right?
It sent in order to expel the gold miners from an indigenous territory, the Yanomami territory. This was at the beginning of the government, and this was partially successful. Okay.
That was my follow-up question to what you.
But now, so far, there has not been an army operated that will be army, navy, and air force in order to repress and destroy all the ships that are gold mining in the rivers. Okay. No. Yes.
Yeah, I had a question when you were presenting like this kind of three type of agricultural categories. I was wondering which is which. I mean, what is included in work? Because it's interesting to think that the industry that plant cellulose trees is forest. This is not for the reforestation. I mean, people will say this is not reforestation. This is a type of industry that profits from plant trees, but this is not reforest. This is not contributing to reforest, or this is problematic to how this reforestation is doing, right? Again,
yeah, it is, because from the biodiversity point of view, completely. But from in this foresting, there is carbon sequestration.
Yeah, exactly. So then my question or my comment is like how to dreaming right, in the region. Saying a little bit following up a little bit what Alex was putting on the table. The problem of land use transformation is connected with a very complex cycle on how we use resources, but also how we manage or govern territoriality in the region. And it's something that we haven't seen clearly is the cycle or vicious cycle, which is virtuous for those economies, between the transformation of land use, the washing money economies like reforested cellulosa forests, but also like the golden mining thingy, and the production of oil in certain areas, and the circulation of money among those economies, which is very well connected. Hidden, of course, because it's illegal, because it's from actors that is quite tricky to follow. But then remains the question on how should we dreaming and thinking environmental policy in that regard, not thinking only that we need to destroy the ships and send the army, because this brings a lot of trouble, no, for the people of the region also, because army is not, militaries are not impartial, militaries are, there's also like strong connections of military with certain companies, no, so there's always like a very messy relations of power there. But here, how to make visible the relations between the land use, deforestation, certain companies, or which policies we should be pulling or paying attention to truly avoid that land is still advancing.
For example, mining companies in Brazil, legal mining companies, mostly foreign capital, they are producing, respecting environmental legislation, okay? And for example, more conservative forces would like that the mining companies should have access to indigenous territory. 1/3 of the Amazon is protected by this green area that I show you. A lot of are indigenous territories. And these are invaded, but not by big corporations. They are invaded by petty crime or organized crime, but not for taking timber that high value, all these kind of things. But not for, I would say, large corporations. This is important because it's different from other countries, okay? I would say that this, for example, the large corporations in Brazil are law obedient, okay? They don't want to be at all in illegal business, okay? So the question would be, the problem is with, let's say, middle capital, that is domestic, generally speaking, that has grown and is a lot interrelated with organized crime. Okay. Imagine, for example, you have a river in the Amazon, not in the most important river, but you have a river in the Amazon where you have 30 ships, okay, all protected by people armed, okay, a militia, almost a militia, okay. This is something that, of course, the army, the Air Force and the Navy say this is terrible. We need to repress this. But at the same time, they say, yeah, but this is not for us to do because we are army. We are trained for killing people. And this is for the police. But the police doesn't have, first of all, state police are corrupt, okay? And federal police, no, is more well paid, for example. But the federal police in the Amazon is very small, and people in the federal police don't want to serve in the Amazon, okay? So it's, and as you said before, this repression will create a lot of problems. And because there are a lot of people, poor people, that work for organized crime, okay, because they don't have another opportunity. So there is it's very difficult to
Basically,
operate.
this the army in the Amazon, they need a military base there, or many bases.
They
like,
have
basically something like fortification of the.
well, there are a lot right now. 20%, almost 25% of the army is settled in the Amazon.
Really?
In many of these, let's say, platoons. There are a lot of platoons in the areas very remote, okay, where you arrive only by helicopter or by river, but half of part of the year, let's say. So more and more, because serving in the Amazon now is promotional. So if you serve in the Amazon, you go up.
Raise your scores.
Before 30 years ago, to serve in the Amazon was a punishment. Now it's not. Okay, there was an incentive.
Like Siberia.
There was an incentive. They have more equipment and so on. But at the same time, they have this. Okay, but to repress organized crime is not our mission. If we do this, we will be contaminated. Okay, like Mexico and other countries. So there is all this. At the same time, they say the law. No, we need to have a policy for repression of organized crime.
But what is their mission if they don't repress crime?
What is
their mission there in Amazon? The army mission.
the mission is against potential enemies. Okay. For example, one paranoia that is common is that the Americans will
land in Amazon.
No, this is paranoia, but anyway, it's present. What is the idea that indigenous territories could claim independence, okay, and supported by foreign missionaries, okay? For example, the Amazon today is much more evangelical country than the Catholic country. I mean, evangelicals growing in more 15 years, Brazil will be evangelical dominant, not anymore, not Catholic, okay? But the Amazon is one area. So the mission is to protect the territory. Why? Because you don't have any more enemies traditionally, the Brazilian army was deployed in the border with Argentina, okay, or was deployed for coup d'état, okay, close to, and this threat doesn't exist anymore. So this is not the mission. I mean, the coup d'état exists, but yeah, but the
and the enemy
the enemy. So now the idea of protecting the Amazon is very important for the armed forces in order to justify budget, in order to have a mission. Because if you don't have enemies in South America, you don't have. So the only way is armed forces will become much more smaller.
At this planting trees.
At the same, they don't do anything like this, but they do. Yes, they support. They complement for building roads. For example, they not only they have like the Corps of Engineers in the United States. There is something similar in Brazil. It's not exactly the same. In order to a division of the army for building roads. That before was in the other parts of the country, the south, but now is used a lot in the Amazon.
Well, thank you very much, Eduardo. Reception waiting for us with some refreshments. Very welcome.
See what he has to say. Just like food up there.
Right. I saw your
No, I
your
mean,
published
it's
any
okay
books.
if they have to.
It's coming, yeah.